Okay, we'll carry on with our materials list. So today I've picked out fabrics. So what happens is at many I guess occasions is especially when we are making illustrations of people, sometimes travel related, sometimes when we are doing food illustration, it helps to know how to draw fabric and how fabric falls to make it look more I guess softer. A picture looks a little softer. You could easily just make a plate for food illustration and be done with it. But then if you add a nice tablecloth around it, it gives you maybe a location. It makes some elements in that can also help the picture of the food pop out. I have done this, I think when we did some cafe illustration or something, we made a nice checker pattern that itself made it look good. Now with fabric, even without a pattern, there are certain folds that it's always good to have that fabric folding around certain objects which are very hard so that you can give some there's a certain organic quality to the entire illustration. So you'll often see this in still life pictures from the past, that they would have some fruit and maybe a wrinkled tablecloth or something. Now, as much as that looks very nice to me, it always looks as if why isn't somebody just sorting out and ironing out those wrinkles before you put that object? Because now I'm thinking, if with all those wrinkles, if somebody is to just pull the tablecloth in one direction, this whole thing is going to fall. It's always that realistic. But I myself enjoy making fabric a lot. And when it comes to drawing people, it's invaluable how those wrinkles and folds can make the human figure look more believable. So we'll just do one basic study on fabrics. I'll share the images so I can speak about these. As we know, fabric comes in different kinds of textures, even basic fabric. So we have slightly coarser fabric, finer fabric, shinier fabrics, depending upon what they're made of. Here, obviously, this looks more like linen or raw cotton. If I didn't know that this logo was there, I would probably think this is more raw cotton. Then we have something similar. This also could pass off as linen, perhaps. It's got its own wrinkly texture and it's got folds. This is a very standard manner of display of fabric when we are sketching. We have 2 points where the fabric is held up and then we have a fold in the middle. Again, another such example. And here's another single drop of fabric. And this is what I want to use it for. If it's done well, a picture just like this can look so beautiful because there are so many things that it says, it shows. And in the Indian context, because we have so much cultural significance for the veil, for the sari, it makes it even more relevant. So we will start off with making just something like this. This almost looks like a towel. So when we are sketching something like this, which has very few points of reference within the object, it all comes down to measuring all these spaces with our eye. So what are the angles of the lines and how far they are from each other? That's about as much as we can do. But many times when I draw fabric, I try to also see a correlation between all the folds themselves. When you do that, then you don't get the end result where one part of the fabric doesn't make any sense while the other part is looking lower, the other part becomes higher. So I'm going to show you how to do that as well. You will see cues of that in all the others as well. You will see a continuous line at the hem, which you can make sense of, that will convince you of the folds in the fabric. So we'll try and do that. Make a drawing of these, one, two, and maybe this one. So we will have this one, the linen, this gray fabric, and this one. We'll start with this one, move on to this one, then to this one. And then we will shade all of them separately. So first we'll just do the drawing bit, get the proportions right, and then do the shading. And if time permits, then we will attempt this one as well. Right. Now the three fabrics that we are going to shade, you can make them in small spaces. We don't want to make them too large. And then the final picture we can make over here, the one with the lady. All right, let's begin with the triangular fold of the fabric. I'm just making it about so large, not too big. And this is really not too complicated, so I'm not going to make an issue of this. But I would start off with this clip in the top. And then from here, actually make that rounded shape of how the fabric is held. And then like we do the clock face directioning, draw a broken line and try to follow that line. It's not straight. It turns around a little bit here and then falls straight down. Then you have the next line somewhere in the center over here. That too starts off going to the side and then comes down. And these two lines you'll see are almost parallel to each other. Then the edge on the right, that falls sideways. And the left edge is also fairly straight. Now we do see the front and we have a diagonal line, which is again not straight. There's a very small undulating shape over here. And as the line turns, it becomes round again. So you'll see this line go up, out, up, and out again. When you have such a simple topic to draw, each of these lines count. Now, if I were to flatten the fold, this is the edge of the fold I would see. And if I were to make it transparent, I will see one fold here, then a line that goes into itself, second fold here, third fold here that rolls in. And because the lighting is such that we do not see these folds too clearly. So I often use subjects like this or objects like that to practice my proportions and measurements. Look at where the next line comes out from the left edge, and between the two ends of the V, which line is higher, which line is lower, and how it turns on its side. These are all just um, accurate shapes that we have to depict. And then at what point does this line go into the central fabric? So often it seems as if this is hardly a subject that you need to give any time to, but it turns out that when you start drawing, the fewer reference points you have, the more difficult it becomes. And that makes the practice uh, important. Now, when we move to the next fabric, which is across two hooks, here we can employ a little bit of geometry. So, whenever you are faced with multiple lines, too many things happening, or too many of the same thing happening, for example, in this case, we have various folds and light and dark shapes. Here, it does help to start off with just geometric shapes. So you have a line that goes straight here. Start with a very loose sketch of some of the lines. So I'm translating this entire shape into just straight lines, building a scaffolding of lines on which then I will make my shapes. So this becomes a triangle. Below that is another triangle. So without making final shapes, you still get to see whether you are managing accurate proportions and placement of lines. Now, in all of this, again, I'm going to encourage you to not hold the pencil like this and draw, because this obscures part of your illustration. Even if you're looking at it from the top, you don't see everything. So try and hold the pencil far away and draw your lines horizontally like this. It may take a little while to get used to this hold, but this is the most effective hold to be able to see your drawing, measure spaces and lines accurately, and constantly keep adjusting them also, at least the initial stages. Your hand is far away enough to not hide anything that you see. And as usual, build from what you've already drawn. Keep adjusting. Now we will be using the eraser at some point over here, because we have to get rid of the lines which are inaccurate. But do that at a later stage. You can see that while you are building these lines, there are some shadows that get created automatically.
So Aditi, even the curved lines, you're depicting them as a straight lines, right?
Yes, all lines are straight lines over here.
Okay.
Now, the way I have drawn it, I can already tell that this triangle can be slightly longer on the left. And then this will allow me to make this part, the left side of the fabric, taper even more. So see how many places I have made this adjustment. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. And then I have the next, this is the distance between the fold which comes in the center towards the bottom and its end, and the angle that that part makes. Maybe this was correct. Okay. Now this stage, I'm going to start erasing the lines that I feel are inaccurate. And even when you're erasing, please keep looking at the illustration constant, the reference image constantly. Once you're happy with this, whatever illustration, whatever framework you have made, we can start with making the lines more defined. Now, I prefer to make the definition and the shading all at once. So before we move to the next drawing, let us try shading this one fully as well. Looking at the fabric, you will see that has many dark and light tones. So choose a pencil or even 2, 3 pencils if you want to, but 2, 3 2B pencils. Mine happens to be HB unnecessarily. That can give you a bigger range. And use a sharp pencil for this. Okay, now start with the smallest part. But everyone doesn't have to start from the same part. So let me clarify that. start from one small section because it's easy to draw. But it is very possible that some of you might want to start from the left, from this section here. Some of you might have a clearer visual of what's happening over here. Some of you might find that these folds are an easier place to start. Whatever it is, look for a small part, and it can be different for all of us. And if you do this more than once, it can be different for even you at different times. So I can see more in this one section. So I'm going to start from here. And I'm going to shade part of it in a mid-tone as well. Not the darkest tones, but start shading as I'm drawing. Because shading occupies space enough so that we can tell distances better. Now we've drawn a triangle base here. So before anything, we have to convert this to the shape that it is. And there's a slight corner over here. And then the line goes straight down. So even in this, as far as possible, do not make those hatched lines at all. And the best bit is in places where you have a lighter color, you can use the eraser to remove earlier lines and even lighten the existing shading that you've done. So in this case, the eraser is used as a tool for drawing, say, a negative line. Now in fabrics, we have very subtle shadows. So, and the lines also are very subtle often. You will have a curve that is so gentle, it almost looks like a straight line. But if you were to make a straight line out of it, that looks wrong. Though there is a visible selvage at the end of this fabric, I'm ignoring that and making my line rather smooth. But if you were to make a selvage, you just make a slightly I guess a more broken line, or it shouldn't be zigzag. It should be an unpredictable, less smooth line. With every fold, keep looking at the direction in which that fold goes. Now, even in a place like this, you can see that there are two layers of the fabric. So this line on the right will come slightly to the right than this line over here. There will hardly be a millimeter of space there, but that will count. And then you can make this S-shaped curve underneath over here and see that the bottom shape is slightly different over here. Shade both of them in a medium tone first because it's easier that way. And then you can shade the inside curve slightly darker. As usual, for darker shades, if you need to change the orientation of your pencil so that if you've made the mid tones in, say, 75-degree angle, make the darker tones in 45-degree angle. Then this shape goes very close to the edge because that fold touches, and then you have a rounded shadow on the right. And this round will often correspond to this edge. What I like best about this exploration is by by now you have started to see only the shapes, and you will focus on faithfully translating only the shapes. And somehow it will look like a piece of fabric when you look at it from afar. Now there's a dark edge to the right of this triangle, these two stacked triangles. I'm making it dark on the top, but in the bottom, first I will put down a medium tone. There is another, I guess, folded fabric layer also on top, but that line is not parallel. Even that turns up. While you're making this sketch, please don't be tempted to zoom in. After we've finished the entire drawing and some preliminary shading, at that point, if you want to see more details, then it's fine to zoom in. At an earlier stage, if you zoom in, then you'll end up getting confused with proportions. Since we are not measuring our proportions with a standard grid, it's important that we do not disturb the eyes with conflicting or varying information. That's why I did not want to move from the second fabric to the third one. The first one we will manage pretty fine because we've drawn all the shapes. Here, in order to be able to draw the shapes properly, we are drawing all these shaded areas as well. Now, since we're working with just a regular 2B pencil, when we need to make darker edges, unfortunately, we have to use the tip of the pencil to really embed the graphite onto the surface of the paper. Now, when we do that, we cannot erase that effectively. That's why do that last. Don't make the darkest tones in the beginning. Once you're confident about what you've drawn, then you can go ahead and make that. At the top of this place where they have hooked the fabric, there are some details that we can't see. They're obscured. But draw the stuff that you can see. Like, for example, there is a heart-shaped shadow over here. It's not fully dark from all sides. It's not sharp edged, yes. And its sharp edges are also in shadow. And this is one of the worst lines that we have to draw, which is from top left to bottom right. It doesn't come easy. But again, holding the pencil far away, draw this line from the top and draw it in parts. And use those lines that we have drawn before to give you guidance. At every stage, please keep checking for internal geometry, internal measurements to ensure that your lines don't go too far. So fabrics are sometimes, I feel, in terms of their materiality, almost like a bridge between man-made objects and organic objects, like maybe fruit or vegetables, flowers, animals also. Now, the reason I say this is because the fabrics often have the same kind of textural quality as we find in fruit or let's say organic material. The smoothness of fabric is like the smoothness of flower petals or fruit. The shadows and the subtleties with how folds fall into each other are almost like the human body, or even how branches grow on trees. So there is a certain softness. I could easily translate something like my hand into a fabric and get almost the same kind of result. So if I were to take this fabric and just fold it 4 times, I'll get the same kind of result in terms of shadows and texture as my hand does. Yet this is man-made. So it's a nice bridge where you can have a few man-made objects and a piece of cloth and then some fruit to put them all together. So when you are shading areas like these, you'll often see that the shadows are so subtle, you don't know where the edge of the shadow lies, like what has happened even over here. So in that case, all I can recommend is identify the loose shape that you have. In this case, you have like a very subtle curve crescent shape over here. And then you have a triangle over here. And you start shading from the middle, from the center of those sections, not the edge, because the edge is barely visible. So I'm going to turn the book now after I have marked that section and start with a light tone right in the center and slowly build on this and extend this line in that light tone a little beyond the edges. We can do exactly the same thing when we encounter dimples in apples or that little partition in pears. So here you don't draw too many lines to demarcate the area, and it works better that way. Now, here's another example. I think I should write a book on the art of philosophy. So this happens to me so frequently, and I see this as the difference between a beginner and a more mature artist. I have drawn a line over here which was wrong, and I adjusted it, and I get a better shape, better proportion. And I can't help but draw a parallel with certain life processes. We sometimes decide on a plan of action and think that that is the best plan of action. But as we proceed on that plan, often what comes to light is that maybe we need to review that plan. But we are so set on this one action that we have decided that we are going to take that we often ignore signs. And then we continue on that plan, and then at the end result is something that we don't want. It's so simple. It's not even like a magical revelation. But when we are doing art, you can practice that change of course immediately. So I keep saying this to everyone, especially beginners, that the first line you make is not the last line you should make, and it's not the only line you will be making. And a pencil line is a pencil line that can be modified and it can be erased. I remember saying this in class once, and people had just gone in splits. The pencil line is not like a marriage. You don't have to stick to the pencil line if you know that the line is wrong. You can adjust it. And often I have found that making that adjustment is so difficult in the beginning because you have really taken pains making that first line itself, since there is such lack of confidence in one's line making ability, that then when someone says, no, this is wrong, make it slightly slanted or slightly straight, there is such trepidation that the beginner just says, you know what, forget it. I'll do this, otherwise I'm not going to do it at all. And in some sense, it almost feels like, I'm sure we've all done it. I know I have. You are so egotistical in your decision making. You think that how could you have thought this wrong and taken the wrong call? And at the end, very sheepishly, if you are mature enough, you'll admit it to the other people who you've wronged, but at least to yourself, to correct yourself and say, next time, maybe, I'll just read the signs, change the course before it gets so bad. So this exercise also helps you to practice moving very subtle in a very subtle manner, creating very subtle shadows and just working with your fingers. This is one of the toughest things that you will need to do. Maintain a very delicate pressure on the paper and make very small movements with pencil. Being able to shade so subtly with such small movements helps overall build your drawing capabilities. Your hand becomes much stronger to draw or absolutely anything. Now, notice here when the fabric folds um, in some cases, you will see a very hard line on the fold. And then that line becomes very subtle towards the end. So it becomes difficult to figure out where that hard line stops. You can see that you can draw a very sharp edge over here, and then suddenly that line becomes very fuzzy. This is translated, if it's just in line, you can translate it as lines that go dark to subtle like that. This will be the edge of the fabric, and that's the end of it. When you have to shade it, it's pretty much the same thing. You will have a dark shadow or even a medium shadow with a hard line. And then this line, it does extend, but there is hardly any line because the shadow travels on top of the fold also and becomes very subtle. So you would get a really sharp edge on top, very light edge in the middle, and then a little bit of the shading comes right on top of the fold itself. That is what we need to recognize. Let me try and make it for you again so you can see how it looks. You have a sharp edge on the top, and then a little bit of that shadow travels on top of this line on the edge, and it'll start looking soft. It seems counterintuitive because we feel that if we want to show this fold faithfully, we should make this a harsh line throughout, but it will not look like a soft fabric then. So just fuzz up the end a little bit on the softer side. Now that is happening on this long angular fold. I'm going to shade the right side of that fold subtly. I can see a very sharp edge up to maybe this point. And then you can see that there's a little bit of shadow on the fold itself that continues right up to the bottom. and merges with the shadow on the left. The shadow on the left has a reasonably sharp edge of its own. But reasonably sharp and sharp are still some distance apart. And that distance is the subtlety on the edge. So let me demonstrate this. If I were to draw an object with a sharp shadow, this indicates that there is a harsh light, a very harsh light. This is like placing the object in sunlight, and you'll get these hard edges. If I want to show a slightly diffused light, I will draw these lines much lighter. It's the same source, but the light has been diffused. Now, if I just make it light, all it shows is that I have less contrast. But if you diffuse the edges a little bit, so with very light pencil marks, you soften the edges of the shadow itself, going just over it. Almost like if you were to take a blending stump and blend the edges, but don't blend the edges with a blending stump, add more graphite. This becomes like diffused light. Within this also, you can change the intensity of the shadow and thereby create a different meaning of the source of light. The bottom of the object has slightly deeper shades, and sometimes the center of the shadow also has deeper shades. This adds to the illusion of more diffusion. Yeah, so can you see the difference between the hard shadow and the soft diffused shadow? In fabrics, we have a combination of both. So we will have a hard shadow. Oh, I need to just take it a little behind. You will have a hard edge in some places where the shadow falls very close to the fabric. You will also have a hard edge where the fold of the fabric itself creates an edge, and there's a shadow that falls on one side of that hard edge. And then you have a lot of diffused shadows where the other end of that very shadow will lighten up because the fabric takes a turn towards the light. So make sure you create a distinction between these two edges. On the left, I will get the effect of a fold or the edge of the fabric. And on the right, it will start becoming diffused. Now, yeah, can you see this? So this will also give you the illusion of 3 dimension, as if from here the fabric is coming a little forward. How strange, and the more you draw, the more you feel there is so much to draw. It's crazy. Who would have thought there's so many things to describe in fabric? Okay, are there any questions about this? I think now we have done enough for everyone to take this forward by themselves. Are you okay with this? Yeah. Then I'm going to skip over the next piece of fabric, which we were going to do over here, because it's going to be more of the same thing. I will not be tackling how to show texture and all, because that is an advanced technique that even I have not explored fully. So I don't even want to go there. There's enough to do with fabric before we do that kind of intense art.
Aditi ma'am,
Yes.
I wanted to ask, like, where, like, in the center, you have this sharp turn.
Ah,
Uh, I mean, it looks very soft over here, but when I attempt it, it gets a bit, because the line is so hard, that curve
right.
that comes so smoothly here. I think I struggle a bit with how should I, do that one, because whenever I try,
Ah.
it's like, that merges in, I mean, very smoothly. But if I try, it's like, it's a harsh line that shows, there's a wrinkle.
No, then in that case, um, do your shading very subtly. Okay, let me try and do this for you. And because I'm not very certain I've understood what you are pointing at, but let's see. I'm just going to faithfully reproduce this. So I have this edge here. There is a sharp line almost of the light part of the fabric that
Yeah.
comes till here.
Hmm.
Even that, when you make that, you can make it with this very so you've seen how I have been shading this edge, right?
Yes.
I've come to this darkness by just adding a little lead at a time and making it with
Hmm.
light strokes rather than going ahead and making a medium
Yeah.
darkness stroke. And I'm adjusting its darkness and the darkness of the shadow or the intensity of the shadow as I'm shading. So it's a building process, one layer on top of the other. So at no point should you uh, make the dark tone or medium tone with a line of that darkness. Sorry, of that intensity. So that at any point in time you can reverse it. So now I've got that sharp tip and I'm taking that further. Over here it becomes again a little subtle and a little light. And again on the left there's almost like a triangular dark edge.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I will first shade in that U shape that I see over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so
Now probably I got it. It's like, yeah, sometimes I'm just trying to do a line and then I do the shading part. So, it looks very odd, but it's with the shading that I have to come to that point rather than with the line.
correct. Correct. So these are exactly the places where you should do that. And then in contrast, literally, you have a, a sharp edged shadow also, where you need to draw that. There's a shadow like this,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is a separate thing altogether.
Hmm.
And it definitely has an edge and a very sharp edge at that. So that part, after you've done all of this, then you have to give a dark tone to this entire shadow. So,
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
okay. Any other questions? Any other difficulties you've come across so far? As I hope you find that this is a very addictive activity. You will be drawing.
Yeah, it is because when you look at the picture, you can see the folds so clearly as they are created by the shadows. But when you try and get it on paper, it doesn't work like that. I don't know, somehow I think it just requires a lot of practice.
Yeah, But this is again, like you said, Alka, you think that you see it and it's the
Yeah.
easy thing to do till we start actually drawing it, and then the requirement is different. So
Uh,
here, because the requirement itself is very subtle. You need subtle lines to show the fabric itself. We can't draw a harsh line. Everything else we can get away with drawing a hard edge.
yeah.
It's mostly fine. But this is excellent practice for when we have to draw facial features. Many times you notice that when you're drawing faces, if you draw a very harsh line for the nose, for example, or even the lips, they
Hmm.
suddenly become like this Ravan look.
Yeah. Yes.
Whatever happens,
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
person looks so angry, and you think that you've drawn the same. It's not as if you've drawn a different shape or it's too big or anything, but everything just looks too harsh. It's because of how we draw the line, just the quality of line that makes a difference.
For example, at the bottom of this, the place where it's hanging down lower,
Mm-hmm.
in the shadows, you can see that um, at the bottom of that fold that you were just shading,
Yeah.
that is protruding, and then there is a dip. So that dip is so obvious in the picture, but to
Yeah.
get it on paper is like, oh my God.
Yeah, so it's the same thing that I told Ritika.
Uh,
Just slowly,
Shading.
slowly
Yeah.
put in more and more graphite lead in that space,
Okay.
and it will just build up. So this technique of building up with just shading is used in some very interesting places. Like I showed you those diffuse shadows, but even things like drawing freckles on faces. Now we don't have many faces with freckles on them, but if you do draw a picture with freckles, and if you draw it like a dot, it looks like a mole. If you draw it with just by making tiny circles in one space with a medium pressure pencil, then it looks like a freckle. So there are lots of such things, even maybe some spots on leaves, the dots on apples, all those things can be made with this kind of movement of the hand. Okay, now after this, shall we move to that lady with the pallu on her head? I'll leave it to you. If you want to continue with this fabric, we can do it. That is not, the lady is not a priority for me. Doing one piece properly is also good enough. What is your choice?
Are we going to continue with the same thing tomorrow? Are
Tomorrow,
we doing a class tomorrow? We're doing a class tomorrow, right? To make
yeah,
up for that.
we're doing a class tomorrow, but we'll be doing something else tomorrow.
Acha, okay.
We have to finish
We'll
at
do.
4 materials. We finished 3, and tomorrow's.
Then why don't we start with the lady so she can tell us how to go about it? Because now this was
Yeah,
explained.
correct.
Is
Exactly.
everyone else okay with that?
Yeah. We'll do that.
All right. So let me first start with the demonstration. Give me 10 minutes, and then we can then you all can begin also, and I can help you with the drawing bit. I think the shading bit you will get mostly. Okay, starting with basic shapes and angles. Same thing. I'm drawing the big fold at the corner first, and then I will draw this big fold over here. Now, compared to the earlier one, this might be slightly less complex. When we come to the bottom, though, end in a line. Don't try to extend this face further. I think I've drawn it a little narrow. So as I start furnishing the details, I will be able to expand this further. This would be my start. Do you want to start with me? Just making this shape first and then we can proceed. I'll just be back in a second. Okay. Let's start with drawing the foreground. That always helps. Because then you can build everything else to size behind it. So I enjoy a detailed shadow like this. There are such subtle lines and shades just in this part. But this can set the tone for everything else. Now, in a small space like this, it's easier to make the dark and light almost without indemnity. And also because this is the beginning, there's nothing else that you've made. And from here now we can begin. So in the event that you've made this shape too small, your whole design will crunch. If it's too big, everything will expand. But at this point, anything is possible. So here I can see also that not all folds or edges of folds are dark. there are two lines of folds here. One is dark and one right next to it is very subtle, simply because it is either so close to the fold in the back that you can't see any shadows between them, or it's a very shallow fold. That's why you can't see it. So if I hold the fabric in this manner, you can see two hard folds. You can see this line and you can see this line. But if I turn it towards the light, you can barely see the fold in the foreground. If I turn it a little away from the light, you can see this much better. So this is what is happening in this area. The line is there, but we don't make it too dark. We just keep it light. Right next to it, we have a line of the fold that we see here. And there's a small shape here. And now there are some subtle lines which are part of the texture of the fabric. Do not confuse that with the folds in the fabric. You can ignore those textural lines if you want, or just make a few that are so obvious that you can't ignore and then move on. Here again, we have a fold which is hard first and then becomes soft. Oh, this is such a beautiful fold in the back. At this point, you'll see something very interesting happen. There's a highlight right here where some of the fabric just pops up. But it's very subtle. And it's in a nice U shape like that. This is, I think, a next level nerdness in art. When you look at folds and you say, oh, this is such a beautiful fold. But I'm sure now you know exactly what I mean.
There's also the lightness of the fabric has come out so well. You know,
Ah,
like you can make out this is like a thin muslin kind of fabric, and
right.
the other one was a thick fabric.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's all there in
You
the
can just see the
language.
lightness, and it's like, how am I going to do this?
Correct. But the time you will get it. It's not very difficult. It's only being able, just be patient and don't rush into shading very dark tones too soon. I remember being so thrilled that when I got my first fold accurately, and that was pure matka. Obviously, uh, I wasn't being taught. It was just something that I knew I had to get. So the thrill, and unfortunately, nobody around me knew what I was talking about, of course. So sadly, it was just me who was feeling such joy the whole day. But I could go and show these things to my mom. I remember I'm sure she would just be bewildered, but she was very sweet. She would just say, "Huh, really? Show me." And then she would make me explain also. Tell me what? What is this? Is this what you did? And I'd be most excitedly telling her, "Ah, see, this is so difficult to do." So I would only create my own sense of difficulty and go and explain it to her, and then she would say, "Wow, very good, very good. Ah, keep it up."
What if we were doing this with a chisel and marble?
Oh, exactly.
That Michelangelo's Madonna, my God.
In a sense, we can look at it also as doing it the same way. We are also chiseling away at the negative space and creating something positive, an illusion of the positive from this. I don't know how this would see the 3D object in obviously a slab of marble.
So yesterday I was reading an article. I think it was on Picasso. Maybe his anniversary or something was coming up, and its title was, practice makes you Picasso.
Oh,
So they talked about, how many sketchbooks he had, wherever he would go, he would just sit and, sketch something or the other. So now I think they are retrieving his sketchbooks and maybe
Oh,
making history, or, I mean, documenting his sketchbooks or something was written. So I just liked, when they said practice makes you Picasso.
how interesting. Very true.
Aditya, I will log off now.
Sorry?
I will log off now.
Okay, okay.
Thanks, Aditya.
See
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Sounding really tired. Good night, Tara.
Night.
So today in a bit, suddenly my in-person students will also start coming. So I'd better warn you guys. But they are usually 15 minutes late. So I think we can finish our class before they land up.
I'm also logging out. I have to go finish cooking. My cook is on leave. Chalo. Bye, everybody. See
Okay, bye Alka. See you.
you tomorrow.
So tomorrow same time, 9:30. Yeah? Is that okay or do you want
9:30 or 9:45, girls. Tomorrow is Sunday.
tomorrow is
Yeah.
Sunday? So should you want it at 10 o'clock? I don't mind 10 also if that's better.
10 is, I work
10
fine
is
for
good.
me. If it's okay with everybody else, that's good.
All right,
Yeah,
so
10
10 to
I'm fine
11:30.
with 10.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
I'm probably not going to be there tomorrow.
Okay,
So yeah, I'll just see the recording.
all right. Okay, will do. Okay, so you think you all can also proceed from here? Are there any questions that I can help you with?
I think for me now I'm better with, because I was very confused. I probably what I was doing was I will draw a line and then, shade around. And then I see, oh, this fold is not coming. But now building up, I think I'm getting better that it's with the shading I have to come to this, not with the line.
Good, good.
So it helped me. Yeah.
So here also, no, I'll just show you this one thing. I keep thinking every turn I have to show you something or the other. So there is one fold that, like this fold, starts off with a hard edge and ends nowhere. But from underneath there, you have another hard fold coming in. That's the bottom of that fold. And you see a hardish edge over here. That becomes very subtle as you go further. So you'll see that in this particular fabric around the person's head. It is the same fold, just the top and bottom of the same. And here it becomes very subtle again and almost disappears into nothing. Okay, all right. Okay, so I guess we can end the session then for today. And please share your pictures on the group.
Yeah.
So maybe what you should all aim for is for now, we are looking at seeing proportions of the folds. That is primary. And the second one is, are you sketching from light to dark or is it dark to medium? So we want it to be light to dark and leave the dark for the end. That's always easier. You can always build more on top than trying to remove something. So in seeing the proportions, expect that a few lines are going to look more crooked than they should be. The distances between few shapes would be not accurate. And this is required in order for you to start adjusting in your head what you are seeing and what you are drawing. So don't be surprised if some things are too long or too wide or some fold suddenly becomes too prominent. It is expected. Okay. All right. So I'll see you tomorrow then, 10 o'clock. I'll put it on
Yeah.
the group and we'll take feedback from everyone else. Bye.
Alright. Thanks, Aditi. Bye,
Bye.
Ritika.
Thank you. Bye.